Property Unfiltered. Real investors, real stories, the good and the bad in property investing.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Property Unfiltered, a collection of raw and uncensored conversations with Simon Loo, who finds himself in the hot seat today. Simon, how are you going?
I'm very good. Thank you very much. Very good to be back for our 6th episode.
Time flies when you're having fun.
I know we've had some, pretty interesting guests, pretty interesting stories as well, over the last couple of months. So today we actually don't have a guest. I'm the only person here. And I thought it might be a good opportunity to maybe have a look back and see, maybe recap the people that have been on and, their stories, and maybe share some common themes about what it takes to be successful in property investing, and maybe some of our listeners can learn about the mentality side of it all. Because coming from me, it's all well and good to get the best properties, to get the right areas, and select the highest growth, this and that, and look at a lot of data and stats and all that kind of stuff that people tend to focus on. But I can tell you probably the one thing that stops people actually achieving their passive income goals or their property goals is it's all a mental and an emotional game. If you have money, if you can sign a few pieces of paper, you can buy property. But buying one after another with setbacks and with, not like a super positive mindset, or not having goals and all that kind of stuff is the kind of stuff that really stops people progressing, at the end of the day. And property is one of those things where you kind of don't realize you make a lot of money on it until you sell. And right up until that point, 100%. And right up until that point, if you think about it, all you're dealing with is mostly negativity. The negativity comes from your friends, your family, your colleagues telling you that you shouldn't be doing this, you should be doing this instead. It can come from the properties themselves, maintenance issues, tenancy issues. It can come from a lot of doom and gloom in the media and all the rest of it. And I think if you don't have a clear, defined purpose or a goal on what you want to achieve, it's really hard to, or it's easy to give up. You know what I mean? So I think that's something quite interesting. We should probably maybe have a chat about.
Yeah, plenty to unpack. But before we do, Simon, what's this process been like for you to go back and I guess reflect on your clients' journeys, the people that you've been working with, that have been the case studies on this show for the last 5 episodes? There's got to be some interesting points in there for you where you're like, oh, yeah, I forgot how much effort buying this property was, or getting someone over the line with choosing to do something that's mental and emotional in itself. What has this process been like for you?
I mean, if I think back on everyone that's come through so far, it's a mix of elation and incredible proudness, that they've achieved what they've achieved, but also with a dose of maybe a little bit of anxiety and panic about some of those scenarios and situations that we had to go through, during those journeys. So, I mean, just recapping, the very first guest we had on was Michael. Michael's my broker and a very good friend who, built 60 properties in his portfolio. It's actually closer to 80 now. After that episode, but I might get him on again
wow.
to do a bit of a recap. And you don't get there by luck. You don't get there by accident. You don't even get there by just pure hard work, and, just talking to him almost every other day, from 15 years ago when we started buying properties together, there's so many war stories. There's so many problems that we had to face and overcome. And over the years, you become desensitized. But as it happens, it's incredibly daunting because in property, when it rains, it pours, right? And every little thing can cost a lot of money. It can impact how you sleep at night significantly. So, I think, looking back at those journeys, I think it's a bit of a realization that it's actually mostly, to be honest, adversity. And I think this is the reason why we had this podcast idea in the first place, is to talk about the good and also the bad stuff. And then we had Hussein on, who's one of our clients, and buying 8 properties in 7 months, and getting close to, or at the time, 160K passive income in less than 3 years. He had a few setbacks with finances and buying properties that were, shall we say, less than ideal. They weren't kind of like what people would expect.
Putting it very nicely, isn't it? Less than ideal.
Less than ideal, but they make money at the end of the day, right? So, I think one of the common themes that we might sort of dive into a bit deeper is staying unemotional. It's easier said than done. A lot of people go, "Oh, we're unemotional," but when you actually look at how you're analyzing properties, you actually are being emotional with things like land size and how close to XYZ you want to be, and whether it's a good suburb or good area or not.
It's so true, isn't it? Even, back down to whether it's near a rail network.
Yeah.
If that's all being near a train station your whole life,
100%.
that's what you're going to be looking for somewhere else, and it might not really be the best bet.
It's not, because, as everywhere, like let's use Sydney as an example, whether you're close to a train station or far away from this train station, you would have made money, if you just bought something back in the day, but we might get into that a little bit later on. We had Stephen Ash, 120K passive income, and quit his job in about 4 years as well. That was a client of ours, and now he's embarking on a property journey as well, in terms of starting his own business and all that kind of stuff. So that kind of transition was quite interesting, I felt, to share with everybody. And then another broker, Hung, he... What was it? He came from like a pirate ship or something like that. Something insane, right? Like, refugees came across, getting into the country was like the most, action-packed blockbuster film, Hollywood style
and then
adventure.
It just kept going.
Yeah. And, growing up in Western Sydney and in sort of like public housing surroundings, and coming from adversity to writing $2 billion worth of loans. He owns a part of the Q station in Manly, which still, I don't know, for me, blows my mind anyway. It's like a huge Sydney landmark. Building mansions for himself to live in, buying properties during COVID, when everyone was sitting at home scared and wondering where the world's going to be, in the next month or whatever. So I think that was a very interesting story to cover, and definitely a lot of lessons learned as well. And then Jai, Jai Ko, another mortgage broker, or investor turned mortgage broker, I guess you can say. Getting passive income to quit his job first, and then his focus was to get his dream home, which if you follow him on Instagram, you can see every other post now is about him, fixing up some fence and building a sauna or something like that. So he's like super proud of what he's achieved and what his home is like. I guess what his goals are at the end of the day. So. I think if I look back at all of these guests, yes, they've all sort of come from different backgrounds, different journeys, different achievements. But I think a lot of the themes and the goals and the characteristics that they have are quite similar. And I can definitely relate them myself, or to them myself as well. So yeah, I think it'd be interesting to definitely have a chat about that for sure.
And I would encourage anyone, if you haven't listened to any of those episodes, go back now before you finish this episode and take a listen. They're all incredible in their own right. They've all taken very, very different paths, different journeys through their property investment portfolio, and they've all achieved success. And they're all still going, Simon, which is incredible to see as well. None of them are sitting on
They're not.
Their laurels.
That's a characteristic in itself, like just whatever it takes kind of a mentality, and, pushing yourself forward. I dare say for a lot of these guests, and myself included, it's no longer about the bottom line. It's no longer about just trying to make as much money as possible. And it's more about like the challenge, and I guess having the mindset that, progress is happiness. It's like we're chasing the next thing that fulfills us, rather than just go, I want to make an extra 100K of passive income or whatever, right? So I know that may sound a little bit arrogant to...
No, but it's a different mentality. It comes back to that
stages,
mindset,
I think,
doesn't
right?
it?
So, the first stage is get yourself to a point where, you're financially free, as everyone puts it. So you're not tied to your 9 to 5, and you're not You're not sort of working endlessly, if that makes sense. And then from there, you've got so many opportunities. Like, you know, a lot of these guests that we've had, they've gone down the path of starting their own businesses, and they found success there, and they kept growing the portfolio and this and that. For some, it might be religious pursuits. It might be, not-for-profit pursuits. You might be just dedicating their lives to, I don't know, a hobby or something that doesn't generate any money, but at least they're fulfilled. So I think as long as you choose your path that gives you the most passion, I think that's ultimately what the goal is. Yeah.
I'm curious, how often do you talk to each of these people or catch up with them? Obviously, there is your client relationship that you do hold with them, but I feel like they've all transcended that and they're all friends to you now too. Yeah,
look, I mean, they're all friends to me, to be honest. You know, we call each other, I mean, some I talk to a lot more than others. We have mutual interests as well. You know, for example, Hung and I, we love cars, racing cars, driving around racetracks and things like that.
Whatever fulfills you.
Yeah, 100%. So, like I mentioned on his podcast, we hang out with each other, outside of work and stuff like that. So yeah, we become good mates. Same with Michael. We talk to each other about not only about work and mutual clients and things like that, but more from a personal goal perspective. What are you doing now? What am I doing now? That kind of thing. Oh, what's your experience with this and that? Outside of the whole, business relationship, I mean, we have a lot of conversations with these guys, almost daily about business. But I think outside of that, we talk a lot now just personally. Because, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, when you surround yourself with people who are equally as driven and with all the same goals and stuff like that, I think that makes a big difference to what you ultimately end up achieving. So I think naturally we just kind of gravitate towards each other, based on what or perhaps a journey that we've experienced so far. So yeah, 100% we do catch up quite a lot.
Awesome to hear. I'm probably going to get ahead of myself here, Simon, with another question, but reflecting back on each of the 5 episodes that we've done before this.
Yeah.
Has there been anything that stood out to you that you have learnt through even those conversations maybe that you didn't know about the guests, or something that you kind of picked up in the process and gone, I didn't even think that we were doing this, but, it's standing out as a common trend or a thread that ties all these people together?
I think when we started doing these recordings, I always anticipated the theme to be very sort of property focused, right? It was about, I guess, the angle that at least I was thinking of was we were going to talk about the good and the bad that would happen in owning and buying lots of properties. But I think it's kind of transcended in a way that it was a lot about the journey side of a lot of these guests, how they got there. And obviously we had lots of discussions about, specific properties and what they did and this and that. But I think more importantly is, more important than that is like the stuff that drives people or drives these people to end up buying the types of properties that they buy and how they grow and all that kind of stuff. I actually think that's way more important, the attitude, than the actual nitty-gritty of it. Because like I said before, anyone can go buy a house if you've got the money saved up and so on. But to be able to build these portfolios and get to this level of success, it definitely takes more than that. It takes a lot more, a lot of things.
And I guess it does help explain that mindset, why they did choose to go house and land, or why they did choose to go apartment. What drove the comfortability around making those investment decisions, and it all comes back. It comes back to that emotional aspect, doesn't it? And trying to make that as unemotional as possible.
Yeah.
But
I mean, one of the key traits of everybody that we've had on so far, including myself, is you have to be unemotional. When you run a business, when you invest in property, it's all about things like cash flow, it's all about things like value. You know, how much are we paying versus how much the property's worth. It's all about whether it has solid growth fundamentals, right? It's got nothing to do with things like I said before, land sizes. It's got nothing to do with things like whether the house is older or newer. You know, whether it's close to the beach or close to the trains, or you know, whether it's an area that we would like to live in, or whether it's an area that we're comfortable with. And I speak to a lot of clients every single day, you know, as part of House Finder, and you know, a lot of people say, "Oh, we're unemotional. We'll buy anything that would make us money." And then you send them properties that will make them money, and they're like, "Oh, I really don't like this. I was kind of hoping for this and that." And I get it. It's super hard to be unemotional because we've all grown up with the notion that buying a property is all based on how we feel. You know, do we love it? Can we see ourselves living it? Can we see our family growing up there? And, you know, like, I mean, land size is something that we're coming up a lot with, you know. And by the way, you know, this is starting to delve into a conversation that we might cover in another episode, because we're starting to talk about some of the myths in property. But land size, I mean, we're getting that. I mean, I get asked this question almost daily, because a lot of the properties we buy are a mix of tiny blocks versus larger blocks. And there's an assumption that having a much larger block of land equals more growth, but it's completely untrue. It's based purely on the character of the suburb. So using Sydney as an example, you know, 200 square meters of land out in Penrith would be unacceptable, right? Because the land sizes out there are all 700-800 square meter blocks. But 200 square meters out in Balmain would be considered like huge luxury, multi-million dollars. And if you think about it this way, if you had the opportunity to rewind the clock 10 years or 15 years when the Sydney boom started booming, and you had the choice to buy property at that point, the only thing that you would think about right now is that you would have bought more, right? You wouldn't care if it was 500 square meters or 600 square meters or 300 square meters, or if you bought in Penrith or you know, Blacktown or Liverpool or Balmain or anything. You would have been like, man, I just wish I bought more, because it all grows. You know, like a rising tide lifts all boats. Everyone's heard of that. It's true. One area might grow a little bit quicker, but sooner or later they all kind of catch up. So I think staying unemotional in all aspects is super important. And I think Hussein in particular, the guest that we had on that bought 8 properties in 7 months, I can tell you straight up, some of those properties that he bought, we talked about this on the episode, they were old, they were, you know, almost falling apart. You know, they were in areas that, you know, if you did the research or the analysis on the suburb, there was no way that you could justify that area to be a good high growth area. But sometimes that's the kind of stuff that grows the most, right? Again, if you look back at what the areas that have grown the most in the past 10, 15 years, it wasn't the fancy eastern suburbs and North Shores and the Bulimbas and so on of Brisbane. It was actually the sort of the cheaper areas that transitioned, that gentrified. So I think his ability in particular to kind of just have that shield, and there was a lot of trust in our relationship as well. You know, so he kind of go, okay, cool, the numbers stack up, Simon, you know, I trust that you know what you're doing. Let's go for it. And we ended up buying all these properties, and now he's, you know, in a great position financially, right? So, you know, I think just kind of having that filter is super important. Like I said, easier said than done. Even I'm a victim of it, you know, when I'm looking at deals for myself nowadays. But, you know, when you think back for the purpose and why each property fits into your goal, really the only purpose is to make you money. You know, you're not living in it, you're not seeing it even. Once it does that purpose, you move it on and you move on to the next one. So I think that's super important.
I think there was probably a few sighs of relief just then when you said it's easier said than done.
Right.
And you said that you still struggle with it yourself.
Yeah.
I'm curious, when you're coaching people through trying not to be emotional, and you probably say all the things that you've just told me now and that you just said on the recording, but there's probably some people that it's much harder to get that message across to than others. How does that then look or go? Are there some people that it's just like, okay, this clearly is not the property for you. We can't make this work right now.
I think the only way that you can be unemotional is to train yourself. And you train yourself by committing to a property that you know you would have never bought, but the numbers, the fundamentals all stack up. And then once you buy it and experience an older property or a property on a smaller block or a property in another one is a lot of land supply. That's another myth that people think, lots of land supply equals no growth. Completely untrue if you look at all the evidence in, let's say, northwest of Sydney, all the way up to Rouse Hill, they've all tripled in value. There's, again, we'll get into another episode, but there's a big explanation as to why. And just doing it, just going, okay, cool, now I own this property. It isn't a property I would normally buy. A few months later, you might go to the property, oh, wow, it's actually made a lot of money. I got all this equity out, the cash flow's great, the area's booming, it's growing. And then you think to yourself, you know what? Now it makes sense, right? Getting into these properties, I can see the upside. I can see why people do it. And by the way, we're not talking about like whether you're buying the super nice house that you would live in versus the absolute, crappy, decrepit, unlivable dump. But everyone has their perception of what is acceptable and what isn't. Some people are super happy with a 300 square meter, sort of Masterton home stamped out house. Some people want the older house that's a fixer-upper on 700 square meters. I think just kind of being open to all opportunities and just going for it without overanalyzing is what enables you to develop a bit more of a thick skin, I guess, yeah.
Training the brain.
100%, yeah.
And it is true, you're supposed to go through that. What is it? If you're not uncomfortable, you're not growing.
Yeah, that's true. Like your comfort zone, like you can't just live in your comfort zone your whole life. I mean, you can.
You can.
You can. Not knocking anyone that does.
You're not going to go very far, are you?
But yeah, if you want progress and if you want to grow and experience new things, you have to get uncomfortable. And that includes, sort of setting your preconceived ideas aside and kind of just, how should I put it? Maybe, just being open to anything really. Yeah.
So staying unemotional, I think that's a real key one. We want to underline that 3 or 4 times so people really get the idea of just how important that is. And as you said, it's been a common thread through all of the investors and guests that have been on this show that they have managed to hold themselves apart from the emotional decision making or the irrational decision making that could be going on. But there's going to be other common threads, I'm sure, that do tie all these people together.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, another common one would be goals, being driven by goals. I know it sounds simple. Everyone thinks they have goals, but to truly have a goal or maybe like a purpose of what you want to achieve, and it's kind of like you make or break. You have to do it. It has to mean something to you. Because again, I speak to a lot of people and I go, what are your goals? Oh, it'd be nice to not have to work, or I want to maybe spend more time with my kids, or I'd like to retire more comfortably. Without sort of being immediately judgmental, you kind of think, okay, cool. It's unlikely that someone with it'd be nice, that kind of mentality is actually going to get to what they need to do. Because like I said before, buying and owning lots of properties over a 10, 15-year period, 20-year period, it's not easy. The stress, the mental toll, the emotional toll, the financial burden, potentially in some cases, can be overwhelming. And you don't really see results, like I said before as well, until you sell the house. So what drives people to actually keep buying 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, start a business, buy another 20 properties, it's driven by either fear or goals. The fear of having to go back to, maybe a time in their life where they felt really uncomfortable and maybe a bit of adversity, or maybe the goals that they want, like the desire to not have to work is so strong that every waking day that they have to get up and put on the suit and get on the train and travel to work is a reminder that they're like, okay, cool, what's next? I need to get my next house. I don't care, whatever it takes. So I think starting off from there, don't even think about positive gearing, negative gearing, where to buy, what to buy. None of that stuff matters, right? What matters is what you actually want to achieve. So if it is passive income, work out how much, work out what time frame, work out why you want passive income. A lot of people say, oh, I want passive income, but why do you want it? Oh, I'm not actually quite sure. Okay, cool. Well, think about that first. Make sure it's a real reason, and then work backwards from there and go, okay, cool. Now I need to buy this today. I need to do this every single year consistently, and that's going to get me to there eventually within a 5 or 10 year time frame. Not having goals as well opens you up to being manipulated, quite honestly, right? Especially in Australia, because property is a national sport in Australia, right? Everyone's an expert. There's a million spruikers out there and people running seminars and courses and, even myself, everyone's got their own opinions and ways of doing things. And if you just go through the next 10, 15 years going, I guess I can buy another property now. I've got pre-approval. I'm going to get another one. You're going to listen to a podcast. You're going to listen to what's happening at the time. You're going to buy this. You're going to buy that. And the danger is you're going to own a bunch of properties that's not really doing anything for you at the end of the 10, 20 year mark. If in the back of your mind you thought, this was going to be enough for me to retire on, but it isn't, right? So I think having that goal just sets the tone and the pace. Okay, what do I need to buy and how often do I need to buy it consistently? And you don't get sold to, you don't get swayed by people around you. And it just sets you on a very sort of clear path, if that makes sense.
I'm curious with each of the guests that we have had on, when have they come to you? That is in what part, what step in their goal-setting journey have they been in when they have come to you and gone, Simon, I want you to buy me some properties. This is what I'm after. Have they all been very, very clear from the get-go, or is it something that you've had to sit down with them and be like, hang on, what is the real reason that we're doing this here?
If I look at each of the guests, everyone has had very clear goals to begin with. Mm-hmm. I will say that two of the guests, at least, who are my clients, Hussein and Stephen, I think they came to me at a point where they were a little bit frustrated with what they had bought so far and what they have done property related at that point in time. So, the goal was real, the goal was right, but maybe they were lacking a little bit of direction. They were maybe led into buying certain types of properties or certain areas that they were sold into, we're going to make a lot of money and this and that, but it never eventuated. Mm-hmm. So, not saying I'm like the beacon of all knowledge of property growth or anything like that, but I think when I kind of sat down with Hussein and Stephen and go, okay, cool, you've got these properties now, that's great. What are you looking to achieve? Okay, cool, passive income, how much? Okay, well, if you want to achieve, 150K a year passive income, you've got these properties now, what we need to do is buy this particular type of property consistently, non-stop, using this strategy, buying below market, all the kind of stuff that I keep talking about. Keep leveraging up sustainably and build your portfolio so you expose yourself to a lot of growth with each of these properties. Quantity is equally as important as quality. And then that's how you're going to, have a lot of equity. You can consolidate your debt, sell off some, pay off some, and there's your passive income. And then they're like, okay, cool, Simon, that makes a lot of sense. Let's do it. And they do it and they stay on the course. And then they become unemotional because now they're driven by the fact that they can see the results, right? Whether it's a 5-bedroom mansion or a 3-bedroom house that needs a lot of work, if you buy it one day and the next day you're getting a lot of money out of it, in terms of profit or growth, that's usually a bit of a light bulb moment for a lot of people that I come in contact with. I guess the proof is in the pudding, right? If you make money, you're gonna want to keep doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I feel like it shows that, you can overlay that strategy over the top of goals.
Yeah.
And that's
It's
how
all
it should
intertwined.
happen.
Yeah.
The fact that, anyone can probably help coach someone to make sure they're sticking with their goals. But
Yeah.
But just because you have those goals doesn't necessarily give you the direction that you're going to need to be able to achieve them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And like, all of these things like we that we talk about, I think they're all kind of mixed in with each other. But there are things that it's easier said than done. I'm sure there are a lot of listeners go, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense. But once you actually put into practice, the emotions creep in.
Yeah. The
uncertainty. Yes, absolutely. And then like maybe, not sweating the small stuff, right? And this is a common problem, but a common thing I get a lot of. There's no such thing as the perfect house. No such thing, right? You buy a house, there's always going to be a leaking tap. The aircon will break in 2 months, right? It's almost like clockwork, right? It was working fine when you did the inspections and you looked at the house and everything, but the hot water tank will go. The fences will start falling over. Like this is the stuff that happens that...
You're stressing me out just talking about it.
But it's like I have a rule of thumb. When you buy a house, in the first 12 months, that's where you get most of the teething issues, right? Because you're buying a house from someone that may not have looked after it as well as you would have. Or you may have bought a house that hasn't been lived in for a very long time. And the small stuff like the teething issues, all the stuff that I mentioned plus hundreds and thousands more, that doesn't matter in the scheme of things, right? Don't let that stuff hold you back, because if you buy the right deal in the right area and you're making $200,000-300,000 profit or equity in a matter of years, who cares if you think back and go, oh, I had to spend $2,000 or $3,000 to replace the aircon, So I think getting I know. It hurts a lot when it happens, right? Because when you're working, let's say 9 to 5, and you're trying to build your portfolio, and you have to drop $3,000 on a new aircon, all you're thinking is, oh man, I'm working the next 2 weeks for free because I have to replace this stupid aircon in a property in Perth that I don't even, I live in Sydney, so I don't even care about it. And again, the way that you overcome the small stuff is by having strong enough goals. Like I said, it's all intertwined, because if you just focus on the goal, all this stuff that you have to fix and this and that, it just becomes whatever, just another admin thing, another cost of doing business. So
that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah.
A cost of doing business.
It is,
and people do not think about it in that way.
No, they just think it's money out, which it is. But if you, again, buy a property where the cash flow is right, you might find over the course of the year, it kind of all evens out. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, it's business 101.
Yeah.
You've literally got a business offering.
Yeah.
There is going to be outflows that you don't necessarily reap the benefit of, or feel like you're able to see as an investment into the business.
I think so, totally. And like, it kind of comes down to the next or another common theme that a lot of these guests have had is that they don't overanalyze, they don't overthink things. Analysis is one thing that robs progress. This has been my experience. When you sit there and think about it too long, not only do you miss out on the opportunity, but you miss out on, the boom. You miss out on the cycles. You miss out on buying the next thing. And it's interesting because some of the most successful people in property, they're not your engineers, they're not your doctors, they're not your professors, they're tradies. They're people that are more sort of taking action. They don't overthink it. Yeah, or they just go, oh, it looks all right. Yeah, it kind of ticks this, I'll get it. Next minute they have 8 houses. You know what I mean? So I think people, when people overanalyze, it definitely stops their progress. And if I look at some of the common traits, like if the right opportunity comes, they just go for it, or they do whatever it takes to make it happen. And then don't go, oh, but it's got a door that needs replacing, or it needs this and that. Like I said, none of that stuff really matters at the end of the day. To become unemotional and like that, like I said, and maybe not overanalyze and not think about the small stuff, that also takes training. It's not something you can do overnight, right? So it's kind of like if you're a musician, you play the guitar, your finger's going to hurt. But after a while, you develop the blisters and it doesn't hurt anymore. So it's kind of a similar analogy. You kind of have to just dive straight in. don't deliberately buy a house that needs lots of work. But, you know,
I'm
maybe
going to make this as hard as possible for myself
Yeah.
by buying the worst possible property I can.
honestly, there might be a lesson there, and you'll probably make money. And in many cases, probably a lot better than what a lot of mums and dads and people who don't have that yet buy, which are things like off-the-plan units and house and land packages and things like that. It's very nice. It's very it's something to be proud of. Oh, I bought this brand new property, but at the end of the day, if it's not making you money and even costing you money, then it's just pointless. So yeah.
How many properties do you think is the sweet spot of it getting easier? And I'm mindful of the fact that you said it's getting hard for you again when you're looking at your own property portfolio.
Oh, I think what I mean when I said that was it's always in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever you look at, whether you look at a house or like a development site or a block of units or whatever, you're always thinking, oh, you know, is it worth it? Is it the right spot? This and that. Like all these emotions do creep in. There's no real hard and fast rule about how many properties. Everyone's different. You know, I've met people who just dive straight in and are unemotional. I think it comes back to your goals. If you start off the journey with a strong enough goal, the emotional stuff and not sweating the small stuff becomes a lot easier to manage, right? If you go into it thinking, oh yeah, it'll be nice to own an investment property, it's probably going to be more of a hard lessons learnt early on. You know, I know a lot of people that go in and into the journey and they buy the unit, the one bed unit or the off the plan or the newer house in the fancy area. And then years later, I guess maybe the realization that they should have bought the other stuff instead, maybe driven from pain as well, is when it clicks for a lot of people as well. So so there's no real way to kind of, you know, I think everyone's a little bit different at the end of the day, yeah.
And you talk about the hard lessons learnt. Is that where you see most people do stop
Yeah.
investing?
Yeah. When it gets too hard, excuses, honestly. We're unfiltered here,
Yeah,
right?
we're unfiltered.
People give themselves excuses, you know, and it probably stems from the fact that they didn't want it bad enough to begin with, right? So, I mean, there's so many distractions in life, whether it's material things or, you know, just natural progression of life. You know, people always dream. A PPOR, owner-occupier, is a very good example, right? People tend to buy their first home or dream of buying their first home to live in, which is fine. And then you get some investors go, oh, I'm going to invest first, make a lot of money, and then I'm going to buy an even better house to live in. You know, and then somewhere along the way of that journey, you might get to 3 or 4 properties, you might have a few setbacks, you might be dealing with some of the small stuff that we talked about. Now, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to sell it all and I'm just going to buy a mediocre house and live happily ever after. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But it's like, you know, I think, yeah, just again, not having the right goals and the right mindset is what. I mean, it's so easy to stop, right? It's like immediate burden off your shoulders, or at least that's what it feels like. So yeah, you either have it or you don't. Sorry to say.
So with that, then I feel like that comes into some of those setbacks that we could possibly see in this process. You know, we talk about hurdles and we talk about making things difficult for ourselves based on circumstances, based on things that may or may not be in our control. But then there is something to be said too, I think, from how we handle the setbacks and pushing through those, because again, it probably relates back to goal setting.
I think it's just don't, maybe a little bit about not being emotional as well. You know, like not being emotional is not necessarily just about, oh, you know, I don't want to be emotional about how large the block size is or whatever. But I think being unemotional when things happen, you know, frustration and stuff like that can, you know, you'll feel it, but don't dwell on it. Don't let it lead to, decisions that would be quite detrimental to your portfolio or your growth or your progress. And, you know, maybe having a little bit of like a whatever it takes mentality as well is one of the common things that I've noticed with all the guests that we've had, including myself, is like I thrive on the fact when bad things happen now. You know, initially it wasn't. When bad things happen, you kind of sort of go, oh no, it's really bad. But now, like when bad things happen, you go, screw it. I'm going to use this as energy to.
Do you really?
Yeah, honestly,
Yeah.
you do. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when bad things happen, I really try to do something else that will make that problem less painful, right? So if, you know, let's say, I don't know, if maybe one of my properties is dealing with a lot of issues and I'm losing money on it or whatever, I might focus, okay, cool. I'm going to focus on doing more work, focusing more work on the business side. I'm going to make more money there, so it's just going to overcome that. It's going to be non-relevant anymore, if that makes sense. So I think whatever it takes, right? And sometimes whatever it takes also means from a positive front, doesn't mean just negative stuff happening. I think if you are presented with an opportunity to buy a particular property or a business or anything, you know, just doing absolutely whatever it takes to get it under your belt. And again, not giving yourself excuses to not do it. Like, oh, you know, I might not have the income or something to do it. You know, maybe you should get more income somehow, you know, which is what I did, getting other jobs and all that kind of stuff to get the next house. So again, it comes back to the drive, I think, always. Yeah.
You make it sound so simple.
Well, not overthinking, you know, not overanalyzing. We talked about it as well. It's all kind of, you know, revolving around the same thing. But yeah, when you think about it too much, like everything is difficult. If you think about how hard it is to just get up in the morning and go to work, right? If you think about every single step along the way, you just think, but you just do it, right? Well, most people just get up and just do it. And then half an hour or an hour later, they're at work somehow, all dressed and clean and happy. But yeah, like at the end of the day, it's just having that sort of mentality as well.
And I feel like this is the perfect time to remind everyone that if you haven't gone back and listened to these past episodes and heard the inspiring stories from all of our guests, please go and do it. The insights, the lessons they've learned, the mistakes they've made on the way have all really crafted them into the property investors who they are today, Simon.
I think that also brings me to another theme. It's, you know, like I've always followed people, you know, in business and in property that have achieved what I'm looking to do, right? The spruikers, property experts, quote unquote, they're a dime a dozen nowadays. They've always been, right? And, you know, you don't learn how to bake a cake reading a book. You know, you want to talk to the baker that's been doing it for 30 years. And I think the same goes with property and finance and passive income. You know, looking at finding people that have done or achieved what you're looking to achieve. And maybe even started at the same point that you are at the moment, you know. So all the lessons that I've learnt in my property journey to get myself to quit my job and all that kind of stuff is stuff that I impart to a lot of my clients nowadays. Inadvertently, you know, it just kind of comes out, or that maybe they ask questions as part of the buying process or after or whatever, like property strategy sessions and things like that. And I think that makes a huge difference because it takes away a lot of the unknown, the uncertainty and the fear. And it is quite scary when every time you make a move in property, you're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars sometimes. So yeah, finding the right people around you and kind of just following them and getting advice from them only is super important. You know, one of the very first things when especially when I was talking with Michael, you know, I think when in our very early days, we only got advice from our parents about what to buy and, you know, how to invest and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, the advice that they give to you has zero, you know, benefit to whether you're going to make money at all because they're not investors. And they just, all they have is your best interest at heart, right? They don't want you to fail.
Which is great.
It's great, yeah. The intention is good, but you end up buying the 1-bedroom unit or you end up buying like this, you know, properties that just don't do very well. And And it all comes down to who you take advice from at the end of the day. So yeah, I think following the right people is super, super important.
If you could crystallize everything we've talked about today into sort of one sentence to impart on all our listeners before we go, because we've covered so much ground today already. There is a lot that people probably should be rewinding and taking notes throughout. But is there a way to condense everything down into one sentence or one simple piece of advice for people to get started on thinking about this?
Yeah.
Because it's not it can't just be this conversation. It's got to be an ongoing conversation that people have with themselves and whoever's coaching them in their property investment journey, and the question that they ask other people in their circle, because that's the only way that they're going to get more from this.
I think it'll be difficult, honestly, to condense everything into one sort of simple phrase. If there is, I'm going to trademark it. But, I mean, there's so many things we talked about, staying unemotional, being driven by goals, not sweating the small stuff, not overanalyzing, understanding that setbacks happen, not letting it get on your skin, whatever it takes, mentality, listening to people that have done what you're looking to achieve, right? But I think probably the main takeaway is coming, like all of that kind of falls into place if you have the right goal. I don't think I can stress that enough, right? Having the right goal and just sticking to that goal means a lot of this stuff will naturally fall in place during the progress. If you're not driven enough, if you don't have the right goal, if you're just doing aimless, buying aimlessly, whether it's for your next property or the next 5 or 10 years, all this stuff is going to affect you, mentally. So
it's the secret sauce.
Yeah, it's a secret sauce. That's it. So yeah.
There you go. You heard it here first. You're going to trademark that?
I don't know. Probably. I think it might be trademarked already. Something like that should be trademarked.
Smart goals?
Yeah, maybe. I'll think about it.
Simon, it has been so wonderful to chat with you today again, to rehash and reflect on everything that we have heard from the first 5 episodes. And can't believe we're at the end of the 6th already.
Yeah, I know. I think there's probably more to come. So, I think it will be a mix of me getting more guests on, obviously, to hear more amazing stories. But, every now and then I might just jump on myself and we'll have a chat about whatever.
Plenty more to come, obviously. And you've alluded to some of that today. We won't give everything away in today's episode. But if you do have any questions about anything that has been covered today, editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au, or they can reach out to you directly, Simon. How can people get in touch?
You can email me directly, simon@housefinder.com.au. All my stuff is on the website. So, yeah, you can find me. I'm sure if you want to find me, you'll find me.
There you go. It's been a wonderful chat, and I'm already looking forward to the next one. Simon Loo, thank you.
Thanks for having me.